Well, good morning. I am thrilled to be here, and let me tell you why. How many of you have seen the movie Mission Impossible, the first one with Tom Cruise? So most of the room has seen this movie. It's about 10 years old, I think, but hopefully you remember the scene in the movie. Tom Cruise is at a cocktail party, and he's standing around talking to folks, and a group of folks come up to him, and they say, "What do you do for a living?" Now, of course, Tom Cruise is an international spy, and he can't say I'm an international spy, and he just wants to be done with this, so he says, "I'm a traffic engineer. I study traffic patterns." And then the guy who's talking to him turns around and goes, "Loser," and walks on. How many of you have felt that way in terms of being in the transportation or the parking space? I mean, let's be honest. Most of us in college did not grow up and say, "I want to be in parking," or "I want to be in traffic or transportation." But that's where we find ourselves today. And the reason I tell that story is for two reasons. First, it's great to be amongst a group of friends who do get excited about what's happening in parking and transportation data. So it's fantastic to be here. But the other thing that I want to point out is things are changing. I have a son who's a senior in high school, and we did a college tour on Friday. And at the college tour, we happened to be there the day that they had their career fair, where all companies kind of come in. Do you want to know what company had the longest line of people waiting to talk to it? It was a taxi company called Uber. Now think about that. How the world has changed, where a taxi company is the hottest company recruiting off of a major campus. Transportation is fundamentally changing. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. I want to talk about the 4 trends that are sort of driving the industry right now, and what that means for transportation, and what it means for parking in general. Now, for those of you who don't know who INRIX is, this is our first NPA. INRIX is the leading provider of traffic and transportation information around the world today. So if you drove in as opposed to staying in a hotel, chances are you saw traffic information in your car or on your mobile phone, or maybe you heard it on the radio or saw it on the TV. In the majority of cases, that data is provided by us. We provide the majority of car companies, the majority of mobile apps, the majority of websites, as well as government agencies with the data that they use to better manage their systems. About a year ago, we acquired ParkMe and decided to make a very big investment into parking information. We've released on-street and off-street dynamic information now to customers. We have more than 6 different car companies now that are using that information, and we continue to make that a very big focus for us. But I want to talk about what's really happening. I mean, our goal as a company is about integrating together the connected car and what we see from governments and cities. We're living at this intersection of smart cities and connected car, with this belief that you cannot have a smart city without getting data from connected cars. And connected and autonomous cars are not that interesting unless you can integrate that with data from the city. So our fundamental belief is if you can provide better data, you can solve, or at least help address, one of society's biggest problems, which is the overall traffic congestion on our roads and trying to improve the overall parking experience. So let me start out by talking about the 4 major trends that are happening right now in the automotive world. We spend our time with all of the major OEMs. They're our customers. And what we see is, and I think everyone in this room is probably familiar with these trends, what we call the ACEs. ACEs, A-C-E-S, autonomous, connected, electric, and shared vehicles. I think everybody's familiar with what's happening in the autonomous vehicle space, and is probably surprised, as is most people, with how fast the autonomous vehicle is developing. Right now, there are over 1,000 autonomous vehicles driving the roads in San Francisco by Google. Right now, if you go to Pennsylvania, you can get an Uber autonomous vehicle. You can summon it on your phone, and that vehicle will drive you from point A to point B autonomously. Now, fortunately, it's still in beta, and they have people who are ready to grab the steering wheel, but these autonomous vehicles are becoming real, and there's pretty much every major automotive manufacturer is investing in making this a reality sooner rather than you would think. We live in the connected space, providing traffic information, parking information, and other information to connected cars. In fact, about 1 out of every 3 vehicles that ships this year will be connected. It's capable of receiving information, but also capable of transmitting information back. And let me just give you one example where that's useful. Last week, or actually about 2 weeks ago, if any of you followed it, there was an autonomous Tesla that crashed in Germany. And the driver of the vehicle said it's because of a defective autopilot. And Tesla, within 1 hour, came out and said autopilot was not engaged, the driver was going 15 miles over the speed limit, and here's what caused the accident. And they're able to do that because, of course, they're taking data from that vehicle to the cloud, and they're able to analyze what's going on with their cars. We live in a very different world than we did just 10 years ago. And if you look at the electric vehicle, completely changing the drivetrain. I grew up in Detroit, and the car for 100 years was 4 wheels, an internal combustion engine, and a drivetrain. That was the car. And now, of course, that's changing. Between Nissan and Chevy and Tesla and literally a dozen other OEMs that are shipping electric vehicles just in the next year, the majority of vehicles are forecast to be electric within the next 5 years. So fundamental change in terms of the overall automotive industry. And then finally, the shared economy. Uber, Didi, all these things, where there's a lot of changes happening. Right? You look at, let's just take General Motors. General Motors invested over $500 million in Lyft, basically a taxi company. They invested $1 billion in a 30-person startup out of Silicon Valley that did autonomous vehicle software. Everything is fundamentally changing in this industry, and it's because of the ACEs. But the question is, why? Why are all 4 of these trends happening at the exact same time? And the answer is because the car, because of connectivity, has become a connected platform. It's become a mobile computing device. Because that car now has a bus, it has sensors, it has data, it has microprocessors, and it has the ability to transmit that to the cloud, that's what's enabling all of these capabilities. Tesla would not be able to ship autonomous vehicles if it weren't for the ability to mine that data and improve the algorithms. Many of you may remember about 4 or 5 months ago, there was an accident that was the Tesla autopilot that was at fault that caused the accident. They fixed that bug and then updated all the cars on the road simultaneously about 3 weeks ago. Right, that ability to upgrade the software enables the autonomous car. Electric vehicles are the same way. You wouldn't have electric vehicles without the ability to connect and manage the range anxiety that people have. And you certainly wouldn't have shared vehicles. Uber wouldn't exist without the ability for a mobile phone to summon those vehicles. So it's fascinating what we're seeing in terms of the ACEs driving the transformation. But what I think most people don't appreciate is just how much that car is already connected today. The majority of vehicles on the road can already receive information, whether it be through satellite, whether it be through terrestrial radio broadcast, or through an embedded cellular modem. And as I said, about 1/3 of vehicles shipping this year, 2016, will have an embedded cellular modem that is not only receiving information, but also transmitting information back. So what does that mean? It's completely changed several things in terms of the industry. Let me give you an example. INRIX started about 10 years ago by collecting traffic information. And back then, state of the art, I kid you not, was people flying traffic helicopters and looking out the window to figure out what was going on. That was state of the art. Today in the United States, there is not one traffic helicopter still flying. And it's because these connected cars are able to transmit information. INRIX receives data from about 300 million vehicles and mobile devices that anonymously tell us how fast they're going, where they're located, and the heading of the vehicle. The traffic information that you see today, whether it be on Waze or whether it be on your Garmin mobile app or in your car or on a website or a TV, that data is coming from vehicles out on the road. That data is being anonymously collected, processed, and helping drivers to avoid congestion on the road. I think many people are familiar with that. What many people may not be familiar with is that we're now starting to collect data around weather events. So windshield wiper status, how fast windshields are going, fog light status, traction control messages. Well, what good is that? The answer is you can actually now tell people and warn people that 2 miles ahead there's a vehicle that just slipped on the ice, or there's a vehicle that's hydroplaning, or that there's heavy fog 3 miles ahead. These can now be detected by the vehicles, processed in the cloud, and then alerts are now being sent. This is live today. Alerts are now being sent to vehicles to say, slow down, people are hydroplaning. Think about the improved safety if people know what the actual hazards are on the roadway. And then think about where this goes with related to parking. We're already collecting parking events. So when people put gear shift in and out of park, we actually collect those events. Those aren't enough to know if someone just parked their car in a parking spot, but that combined with a bunch of other information allows us to predict where their parking may be available. And Volkswagen Group, which is the largest automotive group in the world, consisting of Volkswagen, Audi, and a variety of other brands, is now in beta with technology taking LiDAR sensors to detect open parking. So LiDAR sensors are these sensors on your vehicle that are the ones that tell you if you're backing up and your car goes beep, 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 telling you you're about to hit somebody else. That's a LiDAR sensor. And the LiDAR sensors are on these vehicles already. So why not, as a vehicle's driving up the road, collect where there's vehicles parked and where there's vehicles not parked? You can actually get a very good idea of how many vehicles are parked along the side of the road just by using the LiDAR sensors, and then transmitting that data to the cloud. This is why this connected vehicle is so exciting, because it allows us to do a lot of things that you couldn't do before. So let me give you an example of what this looks like in real time. I'm going to show you a video, and this video is from Cologne, Germany. Cologne actually passed Stuttgart as the #1 most congested city in Germany. And what you're going to see is, this is real-time data that we collected, I think this was back in January or February, real-time data we collected in Cologne. And what you see is, as this starts, you're going to see blips of data driving up the road. And I know the screen's kind of washed out because of the lights, but what you see is, very hard, these are blips of data that we're collecting from vehicles driving, giving us the speed of the actual vehicles on the roadway. And you see it's not just on major freeways, but also on arterials and side streets as well. The icon that you see that just popped up, this is a road weather alert. We've detected snow on the roadway and put an alert for drivers so that this driver who's going from the airport to downtown Cologne can actually change his route based on the roadway conditions itself. As we get into the downtown area, of course, we can detect traffic congestion. We know that one bridge is overly congested because of the vehicles that are driving it in real time. And then that driver can divert to the other bridge. But this is what's interesting. As the person gets into downtown Cologne, we actually can see where there's available parking based on looking at a variety of things. Real-time meter data, real-time information about parking events, as well as real-time feeds we get from parking operators. The bars that you show the person where he can find available parking, the level of parking congestion in the city, so that we can guide that driver from where he's at to the appropriate place where he wants to park. Right, this is what big data has already done. This isn't hypothetical, this isn't a vision. This is live today. This was live data that we pulled from a vehicle. So now let's talk about the parking industry. Right, there's a lot of things happening with autonomous, which I'll talk more about, but let's talk specifically about parking. The problem with parking today is the user experience is horrible. And I think most of you know that. I'll give you an example. 2 weeks ago, I had to go to a board meeting for a nonprofit that I am a part of in downtown Seattle. You know, I work on the east side of the Seattle and had to go to downtown. Now, I've done this probably 24 times in terms of this drive, so I know how long it takes me to get there. So I didn't bother looking at a mobile app or anything. I got in my car and I drove to the garage, which is next to the building that I need to go to. And there was a sign out front that said, garage full. I was like, crap. No problem. I think there's another garage around the other side of the street. So I drove around the other side of the street, and there was a sign that said, full. And then I drove to another garage. It was the fourth garage I got to where I was able to actually find parking for my vehicle. So I pulled in there, paid for parking, and by the time I got to my board meeting, I was 15 minutes late, which is never a good thing if you're going into a board meeting, right? It's a very disjointed user experience because I didn't know that there was an event. I think it was, I guess what they would, our version of Comic-Con, which was called PAX, but where there's a whole bunch of people in the city for a special event had filled up the garages. I didn't know that. So I ended up being late to my overall board meeting. And that's the user experience that many people have today. Now, if you think about what we want, right, what the ideal experience is, what you want is the person before they leave to be able to know that I want to be able to park next to where I'm going, and I want to be assured that I'm going to get a spot before I leave, and I want to be able to pay for that from my vehicle or from my mobile phone. Right, very convenient for me, so that when I pull up, I can be assured that I'm going to get a spot in my normal garage, or that I can pay for it in a very easy way. Because the problem I had when I went to this garage 2 weeks ago is I went up and I got the little ticket, put it in my car, went down to my board meeting, came back up, and I realized you actually had to pay for parking on the first floor. So then I had to go up to my car, get my ticket, come back to the first floor, pay for it, and then go back up to my car. Right? Not a very good user experience. So what we're trying to do is, how do you solve this problem? And the problem is complicated, of course, because this is a very complicated industry. Right, if you look at the different players, and when we started to work with ParkMe, we basically mapped out the entire value chain for the industry. And no surprise, what you find is there are literally dozens of companies trying to do parking transactions. And there's different companies doing on-street parking, working with municipalities around meters. And there's a whole different set of companies that are trying to work with parking operators to enable parking payments. And then you have different companies that are doing parking information. And different set of companies trying to work with automotive OEMs to put it into the automotive players. So it's a very complicated industry, which is what makes it very difficult today. We've worked with a variety of automotive makers, and what we've heard time and time and time again is, I want to put real-time parking information in my car, but how do I do that? Because it's very difficult for someone like, say, BMW, who's shipping cars into 60 different countries. They literally have to go do deals with 100 different folks to get access to inventory information, parking transaction information, and be able to do payment and reservations. That's the problem that exists today. So what we're trying to do, and there's others trying to do it as well, is change this from a big data point of view. We're trying to make it very easy to collect the on-street information. Where are their meters? How much do they charge? Where are they available? And get information from folks like Park Mobile and Pay by Phone, where we've already announced partnerships. And then also collect data from off-street operators and inventory information. And we've done deals now with well over 100 different parking operators to collect real-time inventory information as well as pricing information to be able to provide off-street parking information. And then in the reservations and transaction space, working with a variety of folks to enable the processing of those transactions and provide that money to the parking operators where they can obviously benefit from it. But at the same time then, work with the automotive OEMs. We were fortunate because we already had a relationship with most of the OEMs. And over the course of the last year, we've announced parking deals with Mercedes, Porsche, BMW, Audi, Volkswagen, and Lexus. So the majority of connected vehicles on the road over the coming year, because it takes OEMs a while to ship these type of capabilities in their vehicles, will have real-time parking information across dozens of countries. We're in more than 60 countries, and that's what the OEMs want. They want the ability in your car to say, where is there available parking? How much does it cost? Okay, I want to go there. So your navigation system will automatically route you not to the building you want to go to, but to the parking near that building. And then be able to pay for it from your car itself. So where do we go from here? If you think about the future of the connected car, right, that's step one. Step one is get the information to the driver when they need it so that they can see in the vehicle, I want to go from point A to point B, how do I best do that? But that's only the beginning. If you think about what happens over the next couple of years, it's pretty exciting. Many of you may be familiar with Siri, which I'm guessing most of you have in your pocket as part of your iPhone. Many of you may know Alexa through Amazon Echo and their related devices that allow in your house, which I use all the time, to be able to say, order more milk, and it adds it to my grocery list. We say play music or play classical music, and it plays it automatically through my stereo system because my Alexa Echo device is connected to my stereo speaker. Or if you have Windows 10, you may be familiar with Cortana, which is Microsoft's version of an AI. So all of these different things, Siri, Alexa, Cortana, these are all examples of artificial intelligence systems that use big data, analytics, and personalization to give you the information you want. So that if I say classical music, or if I say play a certain type of music, it knows my preferred style. It knows I like this style and not this style, and it puts it together. Or if I say order milk, it knows the kind of milk that I like. This is an example of machine learning systems. But those systems, within the next 12 months, will be live in the vehicle itself. So that you'll be able to say, I want to park downtown. And it will already know what your preferences are. It will know, do you like to park on street or do you like to park off street? It will know the type of garage you like to park to. It will automatically learn the places you go. So that board meeting that I go to once a month, it knows I go there once a month. It's looked at my calendar, which is on my phone. It knows my past pattern, and it can automatically say, without me inputting anything, when I get in the car, my vehicle will say, hi, Brian. I know that you're going to your board meeting downtown. I know this is your preferred garage. It's going to take you 35 minutes. And oh, by the way, the garage is full, so I'm going to divert you over here to another garage. That may sound like science fiction, but that will be live in vehicles within the next 12 months. Taking AI and machine learning and combining that with real-time parking information and routing information. So it's not science fiction. This exists today, and we're shipping in vehicles this year across more than 4 or 5 different OEMs that we're aware of. It adds a big benefit. Now, what if you're having breakfast in the morning? If you could get an alert to your watch or to your phone, and it would say, hey, I know that you have a meeting at 9 o'clock. I know that your preferred route, but I know that there's an accident, or I know there's construction, so it's going to take you longer than normal, so you need to leave early. Right, that kind of scenario where it's looked at my calendar, it's looked at my past behavior, it's learned where I go at 8 o'clock on Monday mornings, and it's alerting me to something that I need to know about. Right? That's what we call the intelligent car, and that's kind of phase 2. And then finally, phase 3 is the autonomous vehicle. Right? Everybody's talking about the autonomous vehicle and what the implications will be. And as I mentioned, there's already autonomous vehicles on the road today in testing. And what you'll see right now is what's called Class 3 autonomous vehicles. These are vehicles that roughly 70–80% of the time will be able to drive themselves. Won't be able to drive you on the snow, won't be able to drive you on a dirt road up near your cabin, but for 70–80% of the drives, it'll be fine navigating you from point A to point B. And then it'll probably take another 3 to 5 years until you see what are called Class 4 and Class 5 autonomous vehicles, which are 100% autonomous, where you can just get in the vehicle and you don't have to touch the steering wheel or the brake. And as many of you know, the Google vehicles that are currently being tested in San Francisco do not have a steering wheel and do not have a brake. That's the design of the vehicles that they have. But I think many people don't really appreciate the autonomous vehicle, for the most part, will not be something that you buy. The autonomous vehicle will be delivered as a service. In fact, if you talk to Uber, you talk to Ford, you talk to BMW, their goal is for the autonomous vehicle to be delivered as a service. So that you can walk outside your hotel, and with a mobile app, summon a car, it'll pick you up, take you to where you need to be, and then it'll be off delivering somebody else. Right, many people are familiar with Uber, and I've heard, even at dinner last night, people laughing that Uber is burning billions of dollars, which they are. They've raised a ridiculous amount of money, and they're burning billions of dollars. But Uber is one of the largest people investing in the autonomous vehicle. They actually hired the entire Carnegie Mellon science department that was focused on autonomous vehicles. And why is that? Well, if you can eliminate the driver, Uber becomes phenomenally profitable overnight, because that's their biggest cost. There's a reason that they're investing very heavily in this, right? And you're probably familiar with BMW has a program called Reach Now, which is a car sharing service. Zipcar, Car2Go. Ford will have their own service on the road before the end of this year. All these folks are investing in autonomous vehicles, and it's because they want to deliver mobility as a service. Now, many people say, well, guess what? I like owning a car, right? I want to own a car. I really don't want to have mobility delivered as a service. But I challenge you to think about two things. First of all, if I were to do a poll of this room, the majority of you do not actually own a car. The majority of this room, if stats hold for this room as they do for the nation, lease their car. You're already renting a car. You don't actually own it. And for those of you who are leasing a car, let me ask, what's the difference between paying $300, $400, $500 a month to Ford Motor Company to have a car versus paying $300, $400, $500 a month to have access to any car? Right, that's where we're going. BMW right now has already started launching across cities where they put 300, 400 cars in a city, very similar to Zipcar and Car2Go, and you can basically have access to any of these vehicles. And they're moving to a model where for a standard monthly fee, you can just use those cars as much as you want. For those of you in San Francisco or New York, what if for $300 a month, instead of leasing your car, you could get unlimited Uber? Does that change your model of how you drive and how you think about vehicles? Because that's what's coming. And that's why these car companies are focused on delivering mobility as a service. Now, what does it mean for the parking industry? I suggest it means two things. I suggest in the short term, say 3 to 5 years, the next couple years are going to be fantastic. And the reason for that is because think about what's happening. Car2Go, Zipcar, Reach Now, and about 5 others are literally dumping 300 to 400 cars each into major cities to launch their car sharing services. Now, most of those are on street because of relationships with the municipalities, but it has the effect of basically reducing overall inventory in those cities and pushing people into basically off-street parking. So parking gets worse over the next 3 to 5 years, which for consumers may be bad, but for the industry may be good. But then after 5 years, what happens? What happens is probably a decrease in demand. Because once people move to mobility as a service and autonomous vehicles, those vehicles don't need to be parked 8 hours a day at standard garages, right? The parking garage or parking lot becomes more of a depot as these vehicles come in, they wait for 10 minutes, and then they head off to do their pickup. So it becomes more of a transit station than an actual parking garage in the traditional sense. And the other thing I would challenge you to think about is it's not just the technology that's changing, but it's a generational change as well. 16 years ago, 85% of all teenagers had their driver's license when they were 16. Does anyone know what that number is today? 71%. We've gone from 85% to 71% in the last 15 years. Millennials don't get excited about getting a driver's license anymore. In fact, my teenager, who's a senior in high school, a full 1/3 of his class do not have driver's licenses. They just don't think it's important. Part of that is the changes in mobility. They can take Uber from point A to point B, or they can take Car2Go if they live in the city. But part of it is a generational thing. You know, it's interesting because being a geek in transportation, of course I have to go poll the kids in my kids' high school class. And I'm like, why isn't this important to you? And what I realized is, when I was a kid, the driver's license was super important because it meant freedom. It meant going off and spending time with your friends. If you were going to socialize on a Friday night, you would go to the mall, or you would go to a movie. How's that? Okay, so if you were on a Friday night and you were going to go to a movie theater, you needed a car. But think about how people socialize today. My son comes home on a Friday night, and he's on Xbox Live, and he's on Snapchat, and he's on Instagram. He's connecting with his friends, but they're all doing it virtually. So the need to have a car and go to a movie theater is very different for this generation of millennials, which completely changes how we think about transportation. And this is why most of the major car companies are investing in these mobility as a service plans, because that car ownership model is changing very rapidly. So what do? As an industry, we need to work together. We need to recognize that change is coming. We're working right now with the shopping mall operator, which is actually building self-parking garages. They've got a pilot program going on with Tesla, so that when you walk up, when you're driving your car or you're in your car and you show up to the shopping mall, you can basically hit a button and say, "Car, park yourself." And that car will go and it'll park itself into a lot specifically made for autonomous vehicles. Now, why does he do that? And it's fascinating to know. He spends $70,000 per parking stall that he has to build for people to park. With the autonomous vehicle, they can park literally 3 inches apart from one another because no one needs to open the door. So he gets double the capacity into his parking garage by having vehicles self-park as opposed to the traditional model. And that's what consumers want. Cities want better parking management because they want less congestion in the city. I think many of you are familiar that most cities, about 20 to 30% of congestion is caused by people just driving around looking for parking. So the cities want these solutions. Consumers want them. I want the convenience of not having to park, being able to push a button and say, "Park yourself." And then when I'm done, press a button on my mobile app, and the vehicle comes and picks me up. A virtual valet. That's the model we need to get to. And for that to happen, we as an industry need to work together. We need to be open about data, because let's be honest, if your lot and your inventory is not on a mobile app or is not available on the dashboard of a car, to a millennial, you don't exist. My son only navigates using his mobile phone, and only to places that are in that mobile phone. So the inventory, the information needs to be open, it needs to be available. And then we as an industry need to work together on these things like self-parking, semi-autonomous vehicles, as well as be able to do real-time reservations, transactions from the dashboard themselves. I think that is the future of the industry, and that's why I get so excited. So I think we're going to do Q&A in a room following this, so I will turn it back over to Christy. So thank you very much.